Thank you about that. Okay, so today's icebreaker. We will go, we want to go ahead and review our domains. So what was the domain that resonated the most with you and why? For me, it was the education one. Our students seem to be falling behind. We have a lot of third graders that aren't meeting expectations for reading and math. Would anybody else like to go ahead and jump in?
I also have education. Area that now we're better in educating parents. So there's a lot of education.
Yes. Thank you. Anyone else?
What was the question?
Which domain resonated the most for you and why?
I would say education. And also health, because if without the proper health, if the kids aren't eating right and you're not getting their rest and everything, then no matter what we do in the education aspect, they're not going to be ready to learn. So I think I actually believe that those three work.
Yes.
Yeah, I just think
Environment.
you wake up in the morning using this environment, really nice and door, you feel like energetic and just ready to learn, ready to do whatever you want. You want
Anyone else?
I would say that a lot of the, one of the things we know about the domains is that at certain points, they all intersect somewhere or another, right? So it makes it difficult. Today, we're gonna go for the top two. It makes it difficult to say which ones are gonna be, but I think one of the things that we can think about is really like, what has been maybe could be the most impactful to our community. And even though they all may have a certain amount of impact, but let's look at like down the line, especially, right? And where are we gonna really like disrupt systems? But for me, it was two. The top two were education and then kind of just.
Yes, of course, they're all evolving, so affecting one system that going to affect the other. And so the starting off of one will definitely end up improving some of the other. So all great answers. From there, we'll go ahead and move on to our agreements.
So if we could go back to the agenda, go back to the agenda. Our next item would be our meeting agreements. Our meeting agreements. Do we have anyone willing to read our meeting agreements here today, or either online?
Be punctual, stay present and engaged and on topic. Focus on the future. Be authentic to yourself. One person speaks at a time. Agree to disagree respectfully. Finish your sentence, not your paragraph. Step up, step back. Exercise confidentiality when necessary. Be patient and open to technology. Keep your video on if possible. Assume positive intentions. Rainy day will still make flowers. Separate person from the role. Be creative and have fun. Right?
If everybody's on board with that, can we get a thumbs up?
All right. Next, we're gonna have Sylvia come up and she's going to introduce our next presenters for our statement.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here online and in person. I'm really excited about this presentation. We've been working for about a year now with our good friends from Catalyst, California. We can mission them with them to do a really important report that was gonna give us data for the Antelope Valley in terms of the state of the child. And really why we wanted to do this report was several things. One is the Antelope Valley is in need of a lot of data. We are very concerned with the data, and we wanted to especially look at the different domains that are being affected by children or children and families and all our communities being affected. So we wanted to take a look at that and see what kind of factors we needed to focus on from this information. What work are we gonna move to? What are we gonna use as a springboard to start moving our community change agenda as well as our projects, community projects? So we have over 100 residents who participated with us on really guiding the project in terms of what areas we want to research, what types of issues are really affecting the Antelope Valley. And then we have a group of collaborating residents, community leaders and other organizations who really also help with the interviews to get more information about the Antelope Valley. So it was really exciting to be able to finally get the report back and what came out of it. And one of the things that our amazing friends, Maria Khan and Alexander Baker, who are with us today, are going to be showing us really what came out of that report. We did the report release on Monday evening. We presented it. Some of you were there, and it was really just amazing the kind of work that came out of this. And we're really excited. And so I really welcome both Maria and Alexandra to give us just a little more of what we figured out and we found out that was happening here in the Antelope Valley.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's so nice to see you all virtually. I think there's a little bit of feedback coming from the live. If you all can hear me okay. I think I'm hearing like an echo. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Feel free to type in the chat if there's any problems with audio, and then we can adjust. Okay, great. Okay, so good morning again. My name is Maria Khan. I'm a research and data analyst with Catalyst California, and we'll be talking a little bit through the State of the Child report for the Best Start Region 5 area, and I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Alex, who is also on the call.
Hi, yes, my name is Alexandra Baker. Pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm also a research and data analyst for Catalyst California. So excited to be here with you today and presenting this report.
Yeah, so Catalyst California, formerly known as Advancement Project California, is a nonprofit organization that advocates for racial justice by building power and transforming public systems. And we often do this kind of work always with partners like many of the ones that are present today. So we're really excited that for this report and this project, we had the opportunity to partner with the Best Start community as well as with the Children's Bureau, have been phenomenal partners in putting together something that is really meaningful for the Antelope Valley region. And we've really enjoyed being able to be a part of this. As you'll notice on the slides on the screen for this project, what we did is we have bilingual versions. So you can see that we have both the Spanish and English translation on the slides. As I go through the slides, we've done our best to make sure that every slide will have both the Spanish and English version. Sometimes there was just too much content on one slide, so you'll see that there's duplicate slides, and the duplicate slide is just to showcase the Spanish translated version of the content as well. But with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the presentation. So what is this report that I'm talking about, right? What was the purpose of this report? Why did we do it? Really, where did it come from? And so this report that was created on the State of the Child for the Best Start Region 5, the Antelope Valley community, it was really meant to serve kind of fourfold. So firstly, it was to present the most comprehensive analysis of data to date on this region in specific, right? So really looking at the AV as a focal point. We also wanted to understand the state of the children and public systems in the Antelope Valley. So focusing on children, right? And really trying to take a holistic child approach. So of course, while we're focusing on children and really that young, 0 to 5 population, we're still looking at the other factors that will impact children of that age. And then thirdly, we wanted to identify indicators to monitor. As Sylvia touched upon this just a little bit, there's definitely, within the community, people know the challenges that they're facing. People know kind of what are all of the different aspects of what's going on in the community, right? And our job was to kind of provide, okay, when we look at the data, where are those different pain points within the data that we can also look at that line up with these narratives that people are experiencing, and that, we can continue to monitor them with all of the work that's going on. And then lastly, to increase this amount of data available to advocates. So this report, it's both available in English and Spanish as PDF versions, and it'll be available on the website by the end of the week. But in addition to that, there also is a data portal, and this data portal will give you access to all of the data that's used in the report to use and build upon and utilize in your work for advocacy. So yeah, we're really excited about that. And let's go ahead and go into the next slide. Before we get into the findings and all of the heavy data stuff, we want to start out by giving a big shout out and thank you and just appreciation to the community members that have been a really big part of this process. Whether you attended one of our community sense-making sessions or just update presentations, or you interviewed with us, it's truly, I think, the community voices that help guide and make this report what it is, right? We couldn't have sat in a room by ourselves and tried to figure out, what was going on in the AV. It was really the effort on the community's part to be a part of this process and be open with us. And so, yeah, we just really appreciate your hospitality throughout this process of putting together this research and work. So thank you all. Let's go on to the next slide. Thank you. So the big question of the report was, what is the state of the child, right? And it's this huge question of what is the state of the child in the Antelope Valley? And we pondered this a lot going, as we were looking at data, doing the research, talking to people. And before we give you all some of what our synopsis is, we also want to share what we heard from the community themselves, right? I definitely think some of the best indicators of what's happening in the AV is coming from people on the grounds, the parents, the families, the individuals that are living in the area, working in the area. And we heard a whole host of different things. So I'll read just one or two of the quotes that are here, and these are all in the report as well. Somebody shared with us, the state of the child is poor, a lack of resources, a lack of healthcare, a lack of jobs, poverty. I'm deeply concerned about the state of our children. We also had people share hopeful messages as well. So we have someone who said, I want to believe that we can make change, but I hope that we can do it fast enough because I'm concerned that we are going to lose this whole generation. I just want kids to be kids. I want them to be burden-free and joyful, secure in their homes and their families. So as you can see, there's really a range of, not feeling hopeful to feeling hopeful. There are different issues that people have pointed out. But overall, I think there's also this large sentiment of change. The AV that we see today is not the AV that was there 10 years ago. And now the question becomes, what is the AV 10 years from now going to be? And what can we do to sustain it to be the AV that we all know and love? So let's go to the next slide and we're gonna talk about the key message. So we're not gonna do one of those presentations where we wait till the end, to give you what the big message is. So we're gonna start out right off the bat of kind of what was the key takeaway. And so the overall message that we found doing this report and this research was that the family-friendly, low-cost living in the Antelope Valley that residents love and depend on is starting to disappear. And a new, more proactive infrastructure for children and families is greatly needed. And I think one of the key words in here is, proactive, right? So really trying to, especially when we're looking at all of this different data and trying to think about what are the proactive things that we can do to provide the infrastructure that's needed to sustain Antelope Valley to continue to being a place that people can, raise their families in a comfortable happy and healthy environment. Yeah, so we'll dive into a lot more deeply, and you'll see this message kind of throughout the findings. And so before we get into the data part, again, I want to talk a little bit about, a lot of the data is also going to feel kind of heavy. We are going to provide some places to pause, but some of it is very challenging to hear. So before we get into that, we also want to talk about the strengths, right? When we talk to people about the Antelope Valley, like, sure, people brought up the different things that they're struggling with, but people also brought up what they loved about the Antelope Valley, right? I mean, it's such a beautiful community. I'll say, Alex and I presented this presentation in person just last Tuesday, and it was so beautiful to be present in this room with the Antelope Valley community. I mean, you could just feel this, sense of community and connectedness in the room. Even before we started the presentation, we had people coming up and talking to us, and just to see how connected the community was, I think it's so beautiful, and I don't think that exists everywhere. So it was really nice to see and be a part of. But here I want to highlight some of the things that people talked about, the strengths of the AV. So we have people sharing that the Antelope Valley is unique because it provides this small town feel. It has a sense of family, community. People talking about how spacious it is, right? Like, you're talking about a lot of open space in LA, right? That's not something you associate with, Los Angeles. And so how neat that there is a place like the AV where you can have a lot of that open spaciousness for your kids and families to grow up in. Another quote that I'll just highlight from Chad Scott from Sycamores, he said, "What I really like about living here is that there's a different energy than the rest of LA County. It's a slower pace of life. There's a little bit more of an open-minded, community-based feel." And yeah, I loved hearing that, because I think that's something important and to recognize, is that, in this presentation, we're looking to hopefully highlight what's going on in the AV, irrespective of, just all of LA County too, and not clumping it together with the rest of the county, because it is different. It's a unique place on its own, and very enriching in that sense. So let's go ahead and get into the agenda for the rest of the presentation today. So we're going to start off by talking a little bit about the methodology of the report. So I'll go into just a little bit about just the process that we took to develop this work, and then I'll pass it over to Alex to cover the majority of the presentation today, which is going to be on the findings. So we'll talk about the findings that came from the data-driven research, as well as from talking to community members. We'll talk a little bit about recommendations and highlight some community organizations to wrap things up. And then we'll have a portion for question and answer at the end. We will give pauses throughout the presentation, so you can write down your questions as well as your reflections, but we'll wait until the end of the presentation to take them. Great. All right, so the methodology. For the methodology, we really looked at it from 3 different ways, trying to kind of do a mixed-based methodology approach. So firstly, we did a lot of community sense-making sessions, and this was extremely valuable, especially in the beginning when, you're looking at a lot of different content, right? There's so many different domains you can look at, so much different data that you can look at too, right? How do you narrow it down to what is of interest? What is it that we need to kind of take a deep dive into? And we really depended on you all, on the residents and the advocates in the Best Start Network, to let us know what data that they wanted. So we talked to over 100 residents and advocates, and that really helped us narrow down, what we should be looking at, where are the areas to kind of highlight. We analyzed over 30 data-driven indicators. This ranged from anything from demographics to economic outcomes, to educational resources, to housing, equity, etc. Right? It really ranged. I don't even think we put in all of the data that we looked at into the report, right? We wanted to really be able to see what was coming out of it that was interesting, that was surprising, that was following the narratives that we were hearing from the on-the-ground residents and the advocates that we were speaking to. And then lastly, we also held 12 community interviews. So these were in-depth one-on-one sessions that we had with community leaders and parents and residents from the Antelope Valley region. And I think this was one of the most valuable parts of the process too, and just being able to, you know, kind of contextualize what was going on in the data and what we were seeing, and get a deeper understanding of, oh, where some of these, you know, numbers may be coming from. So yeah, all three parts were extremely useful for the development of this report. And I also want to just highlight, you know, data is not perfect. There's definitely some limitations to the data as well. You know, we weren't always able to get the specificity that we would have liked. Sometimes the data, we weren't able to get it at a small enough geographic level where we could, you know, really look at all of the specificity of what's going on in the AV, right? So there's that. We also did our best effort to get as much data where we could break it down by racial groups so we can see what's going on for all of the different diverse communities that are represented here. But for some of the smaller populations, it wasn't easy to get that data. So you'll see that, you know, it kind of ranges depending on where the data sources come from on what we're able to present. Yeah, so keeping that in mind, let's go ahead and move on to the findings section, and I'll turn it over to Alex.
Great, thank you so much, Maria. So as Maria mentioned earlier during the agenda, so we're going to have just brief moments between these kind of like little mini finding sections, just to have a moment to pause and reflect. So we'll just spend like about a minute after each little finding section. Just for the sake of time, we're not going to be able to cover finding number 5, so we're just going to do 1 through 4. And yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started. So the first finding that we found was that the Antelope Valley is populous and diverse with many children, including those who need extra support. Secondly, households, especially those with children, are struggling to cover the high cost of living, and especially because of the high cost of housing in particular. Thirdly, that the resource access is not keeping up with the needs of AV residents. Fourthly, that the school to prison pipeline is resulting from the lack of diversity, scarcity, and inequity in AV. So firstly, on to number 1. So firstly, how the Antelope Valley is populous, diverse with many children and those needing extra support. So I'll just go ahead and preface here, you know, everyone here is pretty much an expert in stuff happening in the AV. So I feel like a lot of these findings are not going to be new to you. So it's nice to just have them recontextualized and just have them available, you know, visually as well. So just, but yeah, you'll probably recognize a lot of these findings just, you know, personally or in your work as well. So starting with the demographics. So in the AV, there's about 120,000 children under the age of 18, about 30,000 are under the age of 5. When it comes to languages, roughly a third of Antelope Valley residents speak Spanish at home, 3.8% speak an Asian, Pacific Islander, or Indo-European language, and the rest speak English. When we're looking at the demographic of children in the AV, I'm sure this is not a surprise to anyone, but the majority of children in the AV are Latino or Latinx at 57%, followed by white at 20%, Black 13%, 2 or more, Asian, AIN, which stands for American Indian Alaskan Native, and then followed by SWANA, which is Southwest Asian and North African. Other, and then lastly, NHPI, which stands for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander. I'll go ahead and just show that same graph in Spanish as well. Okay. So now if we're looking at the AV broken up, you know, student population wise by subgroups, one thing that's really particular about the AV that makes it different from other regions is that there's a high amount of children in foster care, also students experiencing homelessness, and also students with disabilities. So in the AV, there's a lot of students who need extra support compared to other regions. So there's about 2,000 students in foster care, also about the same amount in who are experiencing homelessness, 13,000 who have a disability, and also a large amount, so about 75% of children in the AV are considered to have be in that category of socioeconomically disadvantaged, and that's according to the California Department of Education definition. So that means they might be in the free or reduced meal program, the migrant program, and foster program. And that's kind of an extended definition that's also in the report as well if you're more curious about that definition. There we go. And then the same graph in Spanish as well. I'll just pause there for a moment. And I'll also just take a moment here just to pause really quick before we go on to our next finding, just so people can take a moment to just write down their questions. And we're going to go over all of the questions at the very end of the presentation. Great. Has some services where, okay, we're back in recording. Is about how the CCAV has some programs where they can provide like temporary housing for their clients, and how that the same funds they have to do those programs are just not going as far because even the cost of living is impacting service providers as well. And that's really the case, you know, across the board. And if we're comparing Antelope Valley to Los Angeles County overall too, we're seeing that in the Antelope Valley, families are more likely to earn incomes below the real cost of living, more so than in LA County. So that's also across the board as well. So if you're looking just overall, looking at total households, you're seeing in the Antelope Valley, it's about a little over half of households are living, earning incomes below the real cost of living, compared to LA County, which is only about 40%. That's true of Black households as well, being more than LA County, Latinx or Latino households as well, and white households. What was really surprising was children under 6. So families with children under the age of 6, about 4 in 5 of them are earning incomes below the real cost of living. And that's like really extreme, especially compared to LA County. I'll go ahead and share that same image in Spanish as well, just really quickly. Here's another good quote that really well encapsulates this issue. So this is by Sarah Perry from Valley Oasis, which is a local domestic violence service provider. So she said, historically, AV has been more affordable than other places in LA County. In the last 10 years, that has completely changed. Our housing is no longer affordable, especially for those on any type of services. It doesn't surprise me that half of the households can't afford the cost of living. And I'm sure this is a sentiment shared by many people as well. So the next part of this is how, you know, that combination of the high cost of living and also the lower wages are kind of working together to create a growing unhoused population in the region. So between 2013 and 2017, there were over 600 evictions. Between 17 and June 2022, which is like when we had the most available data, we were running the report, there were over 500 foreclosures. So what this is resulting in is that if you're looking just in the city boundaries of Lancaster and Palmdale, there were nearly 1,000 unhoused people. But if you're looking, you know, outside of those city boundaries, that amount is actually over 4 times as much. So those are really large numbers. The next issue is just how much people are considered to be rent burdened in the Antelope Valley. So we found that nearly 3 in 5 Antelope Valley renters are considered to be rent burdened. So what that means is that they're spending 30% or more of their income on rent. So, you know, that leads to other issues. So if you're spending all your money on rent, that means you don't have money for childcare or other services like your family might really need, or health expenses. So that's really pressing as well, especially the case in West Antelope Valley, East Antelope Valley, Palmdale, Lancaster, and Lake Los Angeles. I'll go ahead and take a moment to pause here as well. So please just take a moment to write down your reflections. You know, some of these findings might be kind of heavy and might just need a bit more time to process, so that's totally fine. Okay, going on to the third finding. So this one was about how resource access is not keeping up with the growing and diverse population in the AV. Here's a really good quote by our very own Carla Garzon, who's an AV parent and resident. So she said, and this is in the context of talking about health resources and services. She said, as a parent of small children, I worry about the availability of pediatric care in case of emergency. There aren't many choices for emergency rooms in the Antelope Valley. Given the locations of some of the emergency rooms, I also worry about safety inside and outside of the facilities. And I think this is a sentiment a lot of people will share in terms of feeling like, you know, if worst comes to worst, something happens, you're kind of unsure about the state of healthcare resources in the Antelope Valley. So, you know, looking at like the state of health resource in the Antelope Valley, we're finding that, you know, 16.4% of Antelope Valley children are having difficulty accessing medical care. And that's based on parent and guardian reports. And that's considered to be the highest among service planning areas of Los Angeles County. So it's extremely high if it's like the highest among spas. And nearly 1,500 live births in the Antelope Valley lacked prenatal care in the first trimester, which is when it's especially pressing. By live births, we mean when there's like instances of pregnancy, for example, there might be like multiple babies born at the same time. For example, somebody might have twins, but that's still considered to be one live birth. So it's like still one birth instance. So that's what we're talking about. Besides that, the entire Antelope Valley is pretty much considered to be an area where there's like a large lack of primary care services and also healthcare overall. Another big one is the lack of mental health care. So here's a graph, we got from the California State Geoportal. So this one is talking about, if there's areas in Los Angeles County that are considered to be health professional shortage areas specifically for mental health professionals. And this is broken up by service planning area. So if you're looking at other parts of LA County, you'll see in blue are the places highlighted that are considered to be health professional shortage areas. And you see like there's some parts in the West, Southeast and South Bay. But if you're looking at the Antelope Valley, the entire Antelope Valley is considered to be a health professional shortage area for mental health professionals. And that's very pressing. Another resource that's really lacking in the Antelope Valley is early childhood education resources. So one of the findings that we found was that over 64% of preschoolers who were eligible for subsidized childcare were not enrolled in publicly subsidized early and care programs. So, that's way over half. So that's a big issue. And also, this will also not come as a surprise to anyone, but 40.9% of Antelope Valley parents were having difficulty finding childcare, and that's also the highest among SPAs. If we're breaking up AV, kind of looking at it by zip codes, this is the top 6 zip codes in the AV that we're having the most unmet need for infants and toddlers and preschool age children. We're seeing, even those percentages with the top are extremely high. So like if you're looking at Leona Valley for infants and toddlers, it's 96.5% of people in the zip code had unmet need for, for resources for their children. And it's almost 100%. So if you're looking at those percentages, they're extremely high. Also the same case for preschoolers, but it's a bit worse in terms of resources for infants and toddlers. And that's something to look out for. So, these are the top 6 zip codes. We're in Leona Valley, Northwest Antelope Valley, Angel Crest, and Tujunga Canyons. So, and also some different zip codes in Lancaster, Northeast Antelope Valley as well. I'll go ahead and pause here really fast before we start our last findings section that we're going to cover today. So just, take a moment to reflect, I'm sure, the section especially, the lack of childcare is something that we've heard a lot in community conversations. And, I think pretty much every time we've talked with community members, that was about the lack of opportunities for children for enrichment and, childcare. And I'm sure this will really resonate with a lot of people as well. So on to our last finding we're going to cover for today is about how these schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline results from a lack of diversity, scarcity, and inequity. So a really good quote we got from this was by Chad Scott from Sycamores, which is a mental health provider in Antelope Valley. So Chad said, the educational system and school districts up here can be challenging. A lot of schools are understaffed and underfunded. Classroom sizes are high and test scores are low. So this is also something we heard a lot in terms of, talking to parents and people involved with the education system as well. So once again, if we're comparing Antelope Valley and Los Angeles County, specifically looking at suspensions, we're seeing that, Antelope Valley suspension rates are higher compared to LA County, and by an entire 3 percentage points. So in Antelope Valley, they're 4.7%. In LA County, they're only 1.7%. And they're also higher compared to the state too. So in the state, it's 3.2%. And if you're breaking up, looking at, suspension rates in the Antelope Valley by subgroup, we're seeing that the students who, need the most care are also the students who are being suspended at the highest rates. So that's students who are in foster care, students who are Black, and students with disabilities. So, that's also a big equity issue that we want to look out for in terms of, things to monitor. Another issue was, also compared, Antelope Valley and LA County, that high school graduation rates were lower in Antelope Valley compared to LA County by an entire almost 19 percentage points. So in Antelope Valley, there were 67.2%, And then LA County, there were 86.1%. And if you break up, looking at, by subgroup in Antelope Valley, we're seeing once again, students who have the most need, who need extra support are also the students who are graduating at the lowest rates in the Antelope Valley. So that's students who are experiencing homelessness, students in the foster care, students with disabilities, students who the CDE considers to be socioeconomically disadvantaged. And if you remember, about 75% of students in the AV were considered to be socioeconomically disadvantaged. So that's a large student population. Students who are Latino or Latinx, and then also students who are Black are like all, below average, even considering the lower than average rate for Antelope Valley. I'll go ahead and share that same finding also in Spanish as well, really quickly. Great, okay, so, okay, we're done with the finding section, so just take a breath here, that was a lot. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to Maria to talk more about, where do we go from here? So now we know what we know, what are some things we can do?
Thank you so much, Alex. Yeah, it's a lot of information to take in, so I appreciate you all sitting through with it, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts once we get to question and answer at the end as well. But let's wrap this up by talking about recommendations. So let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, so we want to talk about what is it that we can kind of do knowing this information. And this is recommendations that are coming from a combination of what we were hearing from the community members to also what we're seeing in the data and kind of what needs to be addressed. So I'll walk through these really quickly and then we'll focus in on 3 of them, the ones that are bolded. So first of all, addressing basic needs, right? A lot of what we're seeing is that, especially with the higher cost of living, the rent burden, right? There's a need to just kind of look at basic needs and making sure that that is taken care of for children and families, so that we can then move on to some of the other indicators that we want to see performing better. Secondly is holding systems accountable, right? A lot of this is also about accountability. It's about systemic issues. It's about addressing things that are a little bit more complicated and more complex than just being able to provide program or funding, but actually holding accountability that those programs and fundings are being used and worked the way that they should be. Thirdly, it's increasing the state's child care subsidy reimbursement rates for early educators and child care providers, right? So a really big emphasis on wanting to see that gap of families that need child care are being able to get that, right? And there is accessibility in them being able to access that. Fourthly, increasing investments in health and mental health services. I think one of the most jarring data findings that came out of this report for me was looking at that health professional shortage map, right? It's really hard to look at it and see just how much of a deficit for health professionals the AV area is. And so there definitely needs to be an emphasis on increasing investments in particularly that domain for this region. Then increasing investments in learning resources for children and families. From a lot of the people that we spoke to, from community members, we heard a lot of resonance with, we want to see more after school programming. We want to see more support so that, when children graduate, they're ready to come into the workforce and bring back all of the things that they can provide into this region, right? Where is that kind of connection of being able to help students get from, transition from student life to young adulthood. Another one that we have is sharing more resources among organizations and individuals. Sometimes what we heard is people talking about, I work in this sector and I know about all of these resources, but I don't feel like there's enough awareness throughout the whole area about it, right? And also keeping in context that this is a really geographically expansive area. It doesn't look like the rest of the, very urban parts of LA. So what does it look like to, make sure that these resources are really equitably accessible across? We also talk about encouraging cross-sector collaboration. This really goes hand in hand with the previous recommendation. And then continuing advocacy for more resources for children and families, and developing new advocates. And this part really comes from when we spoke to the community organizations, right? It was very clear that you all know what you're doing, right? There are some incredible organizations in the AV region, and it's about, what can we do to continue to support those organizations to do the work that they're doing to fill the gaps that they're filling for their communities within the region. So let's go ahead and dive deeply into 3 of the recommendations, the ones that are bolded. So we'll start with this first one, which is addressing basic needs. So in this report, right, what we found is that there was an increase in with participation in the region. We talked a little bit about the foreclosures and how that's leading to more unhoused population, and just more examples of people really needing support for their basic needs. And one of the ways you can do that is by both raising wages and also strengthening these safety net programs, right? I think there needs to be a focus on, where is it that people are going from that place of, I'm having trouble paying, my rent or whatever, and then I'm moving into being unhoused, right? How can these safety net programs protect that population that's somewhat, can be on the edge, and raise the wages, frankly, as well, right? So that it's not just about what you can get, but then, also about that stable income. So yeah, that's one of the first recommendations that we have. And I want to highlight a really great organization that is doing some of this work. So Valley Oasis started out as a domestic violence shelter, and today it's really an all-encompassing community-based organization that serves the AV region. They provide a range of different services. So for over 42 years, this organization has provided numerous support services to different types of individuals, such as housing and legal assistance, access to basic needs, 24-hour hotline, transportation, counseling, and more. So you can see really a lot of anything that people need to be able to get access to their basic needs and have that covered. Another thing to mention is that, the population in need is increasing, and this organization talked to us about how their ability to care for them is restricted by the lack of affordable housing, employment opportunities in the area, or even transportation. So I think this is really important, and going back to our key message at the very beginning, when we're talking about proactive infrastructure, this is where you kind of really have to have that, twofold approach. Like, yes, it's great that these organizations can provide the programs and services to support these families, but we also need to have accountability for proactive infrastructure like affordable housing, employment opportunities, and transportation that continue to let these organizations do the work that they're already doing. Yeah, so let's go on to the second recommendation. So increasing the state's child care subsidy reimbursement rates for early educators and child care providers. Child care providers often are earning poverty wages, unfortunately, and the state really faces a child care workforce shortage overall, and the AV is not immune to that. Increasing their wages, it will help retain and recruit more workers into the field. Increasing access for families can also provide more opportunities for work and incomes which meet their needs, resulting in additional time with their children and the attention that a lot of the population needs. We talked about this being, especially when we're looking at the children and students, this demographic population has a lot of high needs. So we also need caretakers that have the space to be able to provide that need and care. And then, also increasing childcare providers in the field will offer more childcare and more affordable childcare options for the AV family. So it kind of goes hand in hand. The more providers you have, the more options you have. You want to make sure that supply is essentially meeting the demand where it's at. One of the organizations that we'll highlight here, and I want to say there are so many incredible organizations that we could have chosen. We do highlight more in the report, and then I'm sure there's even more beyond what we've been able to get exposed to in our research. But here's one of them. So Project Joy is a community-founded nonprofit organization that aims to provide support for many families, children, and youth in the Antelope Valley region who need to live a full life with stability. The youth program is run by Project Joy And what it does is it provides after-school training, a youth sports camp, and an AI learning program. I think this is phenomenal just hearing about these after-school programs, especially because we talk to so many community members that talk to us about that, especially when you talk to parents. They're talking about just needing more after-school programming, needing to kind of fill that gap between after school and activities that can enrich their child's education further, and everything that comes around with development around that as well. And Project Joy is pretty much tackling exactly that. And in addition to that, the organization also provides some basic needs, family resiliency services, community empowerment resources. Project Joy provides a safe and nourishing place for youth in the Antelope Valley region to set themselves up for success. And let's move on to the last recommendation that we'll touch on in the slides today. So increasing investments in health and mental health services. This is definitely a big one, right? This is an area of over 400,000 people, and it should not be subjected to such service shortages, right? Increases should come from both current budgets as well as from new revenues. For example, advocates can find funds that currently go to law enforcement for responding to mental health and housing crises and redirect them to mental health and housing departments for preventative care. Advocates can also raise funds for community schools with wraparound health services or other services that communities need. So really an emphasis on the investment that needs to take place. So, we can see that map that had a lot of blue in the AV region, hopefully change so that, people have accessibility to health and mental health services within their area and within their community. There are two really great organizations that we want to highlight that are doing this type of work. The first one is NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. They have a really phenomenal program calling Ending the Silence, which is a series of workshops and presentations that focuses on mental health and suicide awareness. And this program actually partners with school districts and community centers throughout the Antelope Valley region. They feature speakers who have survived their own struggles with mental health, as well as increasing mental health awareness. In our interview, when we spoke with the incredible program director for NAMI for the AV region, Jean Harris, she spoke to us about how the pandemic has also worsened the mental health care access for youth, right? How that has impacted the professional staff that work in the mental health sphere within the region, right? And I think that's also important to point out, some of the data isn't even actually caught up with the impacts of the pandemic, right? So the numbers that we're seeing may as well be even slightly worse than what we're seeing, right? So again, just such a huge importance that there are organizations like NAMI working in this region and the work that they're doing. And I really like that they're doing work in schools. Even at the last community presentation that we did on Tuesday, we had somebody speak to us about how, they don't see enough counselors in the schools to be able to help students who might need to process something, right? Or even they might have a traveling counselor, but there could be a student that, needs something a little bit more consistent and stable to have. So yeah, it's great to hear about programs like NAMI doing this kind of work. Another one is Sycamores. This is an agency that really takes a whatever it takes kind of approach to behavioral health and child welfare. They have 10 locations across LA. They also have one in Palmdale, and it offers mental health services for children, families, and young adults. The agency operates a family resource center, which provides a free service, including a food bank, mental assistance program, after-school tutoring, and a family-friendly location for DCFS services, social workers, to host monitored visits for children and their parents. And you'll notice this as a trend for a lot of the organizations that I just highlighted, is that, they really have to kind of become wraparound, right? There are so many different needs and you have to start addressing them holistically. So these organizations, while they have focuses, they're kind of doing it all, right? They're seeing that, oh, this population, I can't talk to them about mental health if they're worried about, food. And so I also am gonna, run this food bank and do that. And you really see how much this community is really lifting each other up and the incredible work that they're doing. So yeah, it was really great. And we feel really honored to be able to have talked to them and really appreciated the insights that they were able to provide. So let's go to the next slide. And this really starts wrapping it up for us. And, you know, before we end things off with recommendations, we also want to talk about what do we want to see policymakers and systems leaders do, right? We already see the great work that these organizations are doing. And as we think about a report like this, you know, we hope that it'll end up on some of the tables of these leaders. And we wanted to highlight the voices of what community members had to say, what community members want to see policymakers and system leaders do. So while we have our recommendations, these are also some of the big ones that came from community members as well and what they want to see. There's a section on this in the report as well that you can read thoroughly, but you know, I'll go ahead and just highlight one or two of the quotes here. So we have people sharing, for enrichment activities, it really comes down to funding. There are a lot of organizations out here that can do enrichment, and that means infrastructure as well, but they do not have the funding, right? So funding has to be a part of the conversation. We have people saying, talk to the children and families instead of telling them what you are going to do. Listen to what they are saying and what people on the ground who are doing the work are saying. And I think this is also really important. You know, something that also I think came out of asking this question was people also just kind of asking for compassion, for asking for empathy, for you know, asking to be listened to, right? Another one I'll just read, you know, somebody said, I wish our local government looked at the unhoused population with compassion and not as a burden, because these are people who need help. And especially when we think of children, right? You saw that unhoused population for students. There really needs to be an emphasis on compassionate kind of care, right? We saw how some of these students are in need, and then we also see the suspension rates, right? And you start asking and questioning kind of what is kind of happening within the data, and what can we do to kind of help improve some of that. So yeah, these are the things that we're seeing, and yeah, we really appreciated hearing a lot of this. But that really wraps it up. Here are the responses in Spanish as well. But yeah, that really wraps up our presentation for today. So yeah, I just want to thank you all for listening. I know it's a lot of information, but we're happy to take any questions that you have and hear reflections that are coming up as well throughout this presentation. Maybe we can have Stephanie from the live room. Let us know if there are questions in there. And if anyone on the Zoom room wants to ask questions, you can use the raise hand feature.
I'm sorry, I didn't really hear that. Can you repeat that, please?
Is there a question?
No questions.
Gotcha, thank you.
If anybody has a question or a comment.
I think I see you.
I just have a comment. I think the information really resonated. And I think the one thing that really sticks with me is the community efforts. Just these like last 2-3 weeks, it's been and school supply giveaways for the kiddos, and it's so beautiful to just get out there in the community and see all this hard work in action, and seeing the smiles in families and children. It just, the information really resonates with what the Antelope Valley stands for, and that's community. And I think that, you know, there are so many great organizations, both small and large, who are really invested in really doing the work. And I keep hearing, you know, like we need to connect and we really need to work together. It's really nice to be a part of those efforts, knowing that we're not just waiting for someone to come and like fix it, right? The community really is putting in the work and looking for solutions and like being a part of those solutions. And so just huge thumbs up to like everyone in the community who's out there doing the work.
Absolutely. I think that's something we've heard time and time again, just like talking to community members of like, there's something I'm not seeing in my community, like all the go-getters are like, you know what, I'm gonna be the one who starts that thing, you know, like whether it's like, you know, like, oh, like, for example, I have a brother with disabilities, so this really resonated with me. Like, there was a group that started because they realized there wasn't a parent support group for parents of people with disabilities. So they like just got together, they started resource sharing. And I think that's really how a lot of things get started, you know, just also when we talked to Kim Watson, same thing, she said, I'm not seeing the enrichment resources I want to see for my kids here. So she's like, you know what, I'm gonna start that. So, and I love the spirit. I think that's really, you know, what I see so much in the AV that I really love. Anyone else?
I think what frustrates me more than anything else is all of this information, all of these programs, they're here. But there's so many people that don't know they exist. And I think that's the most frustrating thing. I follow so many social media platforms. I know so many people in the community, and the person that says, we don't have anything. There's nothing there, there's nothing for the kids, there's nothing for the home. I'm like, where are we living under a rock? There is a lot of things, but that's the first thing I'm saying. Oh, the government doesn't care, our city people don't care, or the different community leaders don't care. And I'm like, well, where are you that you're not able to connect with all of the resources that are out here? Because it's right there. And someone said they're waiting for someone to come knock on the door and say, hello, I've got a job for you today, or here's a house, or here's a car, or here's a program, you know, for your kids out of school. That's not gonna happen. They have to want to go out and get the resources and get the information and ask for the help. But I'm not understanding, how do we get them to realize we're here for them? We have the program, we have the resources, we have the housing, we have the educational for the children, for the adults, all of these resources with disabilities. Everything is there, but they're just not tapping into it, they're not accessing it, and I don't understand what more to do. And it's so frustrating because you just hear complaint after complaint after complaint, that there's nothing. When it is, everybody in this room is a part of some kind of organization, but we all can say, they're saying there's nothing. Yes, it is. And I just get, I get so overwhelmed reading all of this, and I'm like, am I within the ultimate reality? Because I know where there's stuff. And I know so many people that are complaining, saying there's nothing. So I maybe we can find some kind of way to bridge the gap so that they can see. Because they have to want that, they complain. But they have to want to go out and get it, because it is there. I think that's right. I don't know if we're kind of very close to her.
No, she should be fine because the mic's on.
Okay, yeah, the mic.
Mhm.
You're good.
No, you're good,
I
Diane.
can stay right there with them. Oh, okay. I'll sit in again, and I think with Laura.
I think what we need is that this center is one place for people to come and say, here's my problem. And then we can shoot them out to the areas. That to me is the answer to your problem, or your question is that even one number. This is the help line. We call this number, tell us what you need, and we can branch out. Somebody who's got a catalog of all the different programs and pieces of the thing, so they have contacts, places to go, but they needed one place to make it work. I think that's what we can really offer is a central number that they can call, one number. And if you need help in any, call and see what kind of services, maybe tell you what services are available. They can refer you to different services. We need a central area. Isn't that already established to 1 month? I don't know, because I'm.
No, there's already one, it's 2-1, and it's perfect, that's why, which one you need, where we were talking about. The way it used to be about 40-50 years ago, where in each housing project or housing development. We don't like to call it housing project anymore, but something like that, where they had like a community room. In each apartment complex or each community center where the people, where they live. So the people like them having to leave, or they don't have a car, they don't have that thing, they don't have to. Okay, but if it's right there in your building, just go to the room. And every resource that you need, there would be someone there from certain hours to certain hours, they can give you the information. I had suggested that, because some people are saying you have transportation, some people have cell phones, some people have computers, and whatever. So we had in each housing complex or each apartment complex or library or something like that during certain hours that people come in to get the information. That's 211. For LA County, it's not as a call for shorter these things. A lot of people who are saying the line is busy, they don't answer the phone, they don't call you back, or they put you on hold or waiting list or things like that. So it's like if you could break it up into smaller pieces, then maybe people feel like they have a little more access, but it's there. I want to make sure our programs are. I don't know. That's what we're doing. Online, large.
Me? Hi, hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, this is Pilar Diaz Chayachinda. I'm with First 5 LA. I'm the program officer for the Best Start work in Antelope Valley. Really supporting the work. Sylvia and team and all of y'all are doing the great work. I wish I could be there. I am having allergy attack, and this is also why I'm off camera. But I really want to thank you again for the great work and all the time and effort and participation in this State of the Child report effort. I can say that I have read it cover to cover, and there's a lot of information. I know that y'all really took time to contribute and get heard and identify what's needed to be uplifted with the work and the needs of the region. So really appreciate that. And I think there's so much information, so much rich information that, some of it was shared in this limited amount of time in this meeting. So if you haven't read the report, I highly recommend reading it. And then I'm hearing from this space that there's a lot of work happening in the AV, and that was also reflected in the report. What is really the report does is provide that data that you all have quantitatively and qualitatively in your experience and what's happening. And I think it's a very powerful tool to use that and go to elected officials, go to funders, and you really use the data. So this report shouldn't just be, well, now we know. The next step, which I know like Sylvia and team are going to be doing, is like, how are we going to identify the priorities? Because it's nice to have the data, but you have to do something with it. And this data is so special in that, like, this has been talked about for many years in the AV, that we don't have the data. And in the last year, just thinking about all the work that you all have been doing in the Best Start meetings. So there's a State of the Child report, there's a data mats, the data sense, making the time that you've taken to do that. You've done so much work. So I'm really excited to see the next steps of how are you going to change the system, because it's great that there are resources in the community. It's great that there are people stepping up to meet the needs that are not being met by the systems, by the county, by the cities, state, etc. But and the community is doing that, which is great. But I think the next step is, how are you going to call upon on the elected officials, on the funders and other folks to support the region, so that it's not just you doing the work. And I really think that this data is such an important tool. I know I've been sharing it in the spaces that I've been. I've shared it with my colleagues. I'm sharing it with other funders, and then other community partners, county folks that I'm connected with. I know that the other partners of the AIM partners attended the meeting last Tuesday as well. So this is being talked about. So just know that, like, I think I mentioned it in a previous meeting, that Antelope Valley is like really being, it's like looking at the great work that you're doing. So keep doing that great work. And I hope that, you know, this data is not just, you're going to share the data because again, the information is great, but the question for the region and for the work is what's the next step? So I just wanted to share my, you know, my gratitude. I know it's a lot. I talked to Sylvia a lot and then the team, and I've attended meetings. So just want to share the gratitude, and I'm looking forward to seeing how y'all change the system. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. And
One more, then we have to move on with our agenda. I saw Denise, did you still want something? And I saw Loretta, but Denise. Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, we're looking at all of this, and everything that came out is communication. Communication is a big one. If we want to make a difference, if we want people to know, we want more people involved with that star, all the outlying communities. And we can let people know that here, number one. And that might take zero grassroots thing, by going out to the community meetings, by going out to the village, where they have a school meeting, or whatever it's set out there. Going out to all of those outlying areas and say, hey, you know, here, this is the side. If it wasn't for the round, I didn't even know about this stuff. If it wasn't for me coming to these meetings, I would be only out to 1 month. I've been wanting to have a lot of things that I've known since I've been coming. Okay. And there's a lot of that's so if I don't know about it, I remember beginning with my business, I get children meetings. If I don't know about this stuff, then all those people that may come that are they're gonna have. And if they don't have it, then they can be involved and get involved in it. More people from all different areas, but it's such a plus communicating and then they will hear and it would have, and that's my understanding.
And a lot of this is trust. A lot of people that I talk to, the first thing they'll say is, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna take my kids away from me if I can't decide to say things from the live or teach control the truth? That's the very first thing they think is that you're going to their student knows. And it's not necessarily sort of a matter of us getting out, speaking to people and building that, and they want to that they'll trust us in order to come to get the service.
Yeah. And I think, and I'm going to so it's Sylvia, but I do want to say this. One young lady brought this up on Tuesday evening after we got the report. She said she's the manager of an apartment complex. And the majority of, and she's seen the infrastructure, and she's seen systems that work for children being detained, or not being detained. But one of the things that she brought out that stood out to me is that the majority of the adults that live in those apartments, and it goes by income, but they are illiterate, so they need help understanding. So while you say, well, while this material, all this information is there, but if they are unable or unable to understand, if they are at the third grade level or below, and understanding how to access and how to evaluate the information that might be right there. How do we, again, build trust as a community and say, we are here and let us walk by you? And the best way I know to build trust with people and develop relationships, let's come to the table. You know, break was right. I did right. Let's talk about it. I'm gonna turn this over.
Yeah, these are, again, there's so much data, so much information, and I love having these conversations. And again, this isn't just a one-time report. This isn't just a one-time conversation. This is the key point, in order to move our forward. You know, Betsart really has some ambitious goals to build, but it all starts with the conversation. But it all starts with what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go with this. Was there anything else on virtually, Stephanie? Any more questions or anything in the chat?
Sylvia, so Joseph had a really good question. Joseph asked if like there's a document listing the resources of participants on this call.
We and all outreach in our meeting, these agencies are available to them. Joseph, is there a document missing to the on this call?
We will be sharing this report, everybody here has a copy of the report, but everybody virtually will also be receiving by the end of this week, we'll be receiving the web version of this, that we can share with everybody, and again, this is information that, even some of our smaller organizations that we have here in the Antelope Valley can utilize this information for funding purposes, when you're writing grants, when you're looking for more funding for the smaller organizations or even large organizations. This is really good data that can be utilized for that, so we definitely will be sharing that with everybody. Yeah, so I just really want to thank Alexandra and Maria for this phenomenal presentation. It really has opened our eyes to a lot of what the need is. And some of the need we knew, some of it is a little bit, more astounding in terms of, I didn't realize some of the numbers could be like that, but this is definitely what is gonna be driving and guiding some of the work that we're gonna continue to do in the Antelope Valley.
Oh, Joseph had a question. Is there a document in the resources? Oh,
Yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and move on. The last meeting, we did a survey that we sent out that we wanted to share with everybody. We got very little responses, so what we're gonna do today is we decided to have a poll online, and go back to the other slide, please. And we have the ballots here. But before we do any voting, what I wanted to talk about is, I know we talked a little bit about this before, but in terms of choosing, whether we want to have one community change agenda, one focus area, or two. And what I really want to do is I want to be realistic in terms of what we are going to be doing and what it means to take on one or two community change agendas. We'll have the issue, we'll have the domain that we vote on. We are gonna have to gather all, if there isn't enough data, we're gonna look for more data, we're gonna look at what policy and advocacy is out there regarding that domain. We're gonna look at, are there other agencies running the same type of services in this issue? We're gonna also then have to, here at START, we'll have to develop committees. And the committees will then be the ones that are gonna be looking for the data, looking for the policy, looking for the other collaboration, and bringing it here to the partnership where we can vote on what the projects are gonna be. So really, it's a lot of work, but it really is gonna be up to you whether you wanna do one domain or two domains. So the first poll that we're gonna do today, if you see, if you go back to the last slide, sorry, you'll see the half sheet that has this picture on it. That's for the domain, it's this one, that's for in person. Yeah, that's this one, yeah. You'll look at this one, and then Stephanie will come around, or Omar will come around with the thing. You get to choose whether we want to have one community change agenda or two, and then if I'm watching it now. Okay, and we're also watching the poll online. So let's get those out of the box to you. Oh, you need more. Oh, okay.
Stephanie, you changed it.
And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the results after we do the poll tonight. I'm sorry. It was just like we're saying, if we do one, this is the work that goes into it. You do two, all this work goes into it, is really what we're saying. So we're asking you if you feel that as a group, we should just handle one community change agenda, or we should do two. Yeah, so that's something the voting here.
Yeah.
So that was what I was saying. So basically, the work that goes into it, we're gonna have to do. Yeah, they are. That's what I'm saying is, if we do two, we're gonna do two types of work for each one. And we look at it and it's like, do you want to be, like if we do have two domains, will it be? We're gonna need a group for one domain and a group for another domain. It really takes on a lot of people, and so sometimes we think like, yeah, two are great, but do we really have the capacity to do two for one? So really, those are just things we have to do. Not discouraging doing two at all. I'm just saying, we just have to, be positive with the work that we have, because we also don't want to overwhelm. Yeah, and that's the thing, if we were to say that we go to one domain, we could always say, let's do our first year one domain, and later on we say, hey, let's take on the second domain, I think we're ready to do that. So those are just options that we can do. And then, like I said, we're gonna take the poll again at night at our evening meeting, and then we'll share the results with everybody once we have all of the results. Okay, and then, I'm gonna get the poll.
Has everyone online voted? Has everyone online voted?
Okay. Perfect. And then next slide. So we also have with us today, we have a presentation from our partners at ABPH, who will just be giving us a tips against the summer heat. We know that it has been, also we want to make sure that we all have tips and how to stay healthy, cool, and protected, because the heat can be really, really horrible. That's as far as it goes now.
I think it's my better knee, it's better.
Talk to our partners from ABPH.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Maximino Aquino. I'm the program manager for public awareness and community outreach for Antelope Valley Partners for Health. First of all, I would like to really acknowledge everybody on the call, everybody in the community for all the amazing work, the Antelope Valley is doing. And like you stated, there is a lot of heat waves happening in this high desert. And before I hand it over to my colleague Leslie to present, I just wanted to let you guys know that if you do have any events coming up or any webinars or workshops that we're able to really give a presentation to, please let us know. I'll go ahead and provide my email in the chat, so that way we could educate the community about the extreme heat. So at this time, I'll go ahead and pass it over to my colleague Leslie with the brief presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, hello, my name is Leslie Zamora. I'm a system navigator here at Antelope Valley Partners for Health. And today I will be informing you all about this extreme heat. Let me know if you could see my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so first of all, what is extreme heat? Extreme heat is hot weather that exceeds normal expectations, such as heat waves. Heat waves happen when hot, humid weather lasts for 2 or more days without cooling off at night. Heat stress. Heat stress is additional stress on the body due to high temperatures. Heat stress can occur in outdoor environments, indoor with poor ventilation, and cooling indoors with warm conditions. Some of the heat stress hazards are heat strokes and heat exhaustion.
Leslie, there's like a screen on our view that says presenter window. This window is for you. Place it on the screen only you can see, such as it's showing on your screen share.
Which one? I'm sorry.
On your presentation, it's like on the presenter view, and there's a little window right in the middle, so we can't really see the presentation.
Okay.
I think you can stop sharing and reshare.
Okay. Is it showing now?
That looks better.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So heat exhaustion. Heat exhaustion is the body's response to excessive loss of salt and water, and it usually happens through excessive sweating. It mostly affects the elderly and infants, and those who have high blood pressure and obesity. It can also affect those working in a hot environment, and it can lead to a heat stroke. Some signs of heat exhaustion are heavy sweating, cool, moist skin, headache, dizziness, weakness, thirst, lightheadedness, irritability, fast heartbeat, nausea, and vomiting. Some of the treatments for heat exhaustion are to rest in cool shaded areas or any areas that have AC. You should drink plenty of water or other non-alcoholic drinks. Take a cool shower or bath, any sponge bath. And if it doesn't get better after 60 minutes, you should go to a clinic. So what is a heat stroke? A heat stroke is the most serious of all heat-related disorders. It happens when the body is unable to control its temperature and sweating mechanism fails and your body is unable to cool itself down. It can cause your body to reach 106 degrees Fahrenheit, 41 Celsius in about 10 to 15 minutes. And if it is not treated, it can cause death of a permanent disability. Some signs to look out for heat strokes are high body temperature, red hot dry skin, and chills, throbbing headache, confusion, dizziness, slurred speech, loss of consciousness, and seizures. Some treatments for heat strokes. If you believe someone is experiencing a heat stroke, you should cool them down and immediately call 911. If the body is overheating, so ultimately you want to cool it down, you should move a person to a cool area with AC, and remove any heavy exterior clothes. You can also soak or shower them with cold water. And last but not least, fan their body and get them into cool water. So thank you so much for your time. And for more information, you can visit the website www.heatreadyca.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian and Leslie for that. So the next thing that we're gonna do is, I'm not sure if everybody got a chance to see the last email that Stephanie had sent out, and what we sent out was the data maps again, and then we also sent out a criteria process sheet. And you'll see the criteria process sheet throughout the table. It's this one, has a different colors. And what this is that we went through, many of you were with us when we went through each domain, and we talked about in depth about what issues were affecting the Antelope Valley, what the stats look like. And so now we're at a point where we need to look at narrowing down our list and start from there and see where we want to go. So today what we're gonna ask is, there are several questions. Can you go to the next slide, please? Sorry. This is what the criteria process looks like. So there's a couple of questions and there's a couple of comments, it's just reflection type information. So and we want to go through some of these steps with the data and just kind of say, like, the first thing is, will this issue have an impact in the Antelope Valley, or is it already, or will it, right? The next step to think about is, am I aware that there's sufficient data around this issue, or is it going to be something that we're really going to have to find a lot more data on? Then we have to look at, does that data demonstrate that it is a high priority in the Antelope Valley. And because we know that Best Start really looks at systems change and policy advocacy, am I aware, like when I'm thinking about this, am I aware that this specific issue has policy and advocacy as well as change, systems change work around it? Has there been done, any work like that been done, or is that something that's gonna have to start? Then we're gonna look at, are there other partners or other focused organizations in the Antelope Valley that are focusing on a specific issue? And then we think about, are there barriers? The ones that are working already on this issue, have they experienced barriers or challenges? And then lastly, we wanna think, am I confident, once I've answered these questions on the different domains, am I confident that if we select this issue, that the lives of children, families and youth and residents of the Antelope Valley will be impacted significantly in a positive way? So we just wanted kind of to look at that. We're gonna take, the second poll that we want to take is that we want to choose your top 2 domains. Can you go back to the domain? And that's where you'll see the second little polling sheet. It has the domains. And we want you to think about this after, many of you were here when we did the data maps on a lot of these issues, but really think about what's happening in the Antelope Valley and what top 2 domains. You're only gonna vote on 2. There's some you're gonna vote on 2. Do you wanna see Best Start taking on as our community change agenda? From the 2, then we'll, depending on how we get the voting this morning and then again tonight, we will then share the results. If there's like 3-way tie or something like that, then we'll do a finalizing, type of balloting. But for now, you'll see the half sheet that has like a little turquoise block, which is similar to this. And you're gonna pick what 2 domains you feel that Best Start needs to do, and then Darrell will do the poll online. Any questions? No. Or yeah, we will then share it with you all, and then go from there. And like we said before, some of this work, really, we wanted to be really intentional about choosing our community change agenda, that it wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction, right? Because what comes from our community change agenda is really then we create once we pick, like, for example, let's just say housing is one of the domains we choose. That's not gonna be our community change agenda. We have to then break it down. What part of housing that's affecting children and families 0 to 5? What specific area? So we still have a little bit of work to do. And once we pick our top 2 domains, we'll start breaking that down. And then I would say that probably maybe a little bit before the end of the year, we will have completed our community change agenda. That's going to be added to the charter. All this work that we're doing is being added to the charter so that by the new year we can have a completed charter that is going to be run by all of you. And then once we narrow it down, we're going to do like committees on whatever our CCA is, and then bring back to the partnership meetings what our projects are gonna look like. Then every project that we do within the community will tie back in to what our community change agenda is. So, and then the other thing too is any of you who are here in person, if you weren't here for any of the times that we talked about the data maps, we have all of the data maps here, and you can pick one up. We have them both in English and Spanish, and you can pick them. I know that Stephanie also emailed them, so but if you want one in paper, please help yourself with that. And then next slide. Okay, so we did the poll, so Darrell, I'll hand it off to you. Oh, okay. You guys are great, quick. We anticipated it would take a little longer, but you guys are on it, so it's all good.
All right, so we come to the conclusion, but, at this point, we've done our evaluations, we voted. What has been your takeaway, and you can put this in the chat for those of you who are online, what did you get out of today's meeting? Because we're moving, put some feet to all of this. You're giving birth to something. What are your thoughts at this point of where we are with our Head Start? And the information that was shared. But anyone likes to share how it affects you? Diana Collins.
I found this to be, the whole process has been really eye-opening. And, it also had introduced me to a lot of resources that I didn't know that. So I found this whole process to be very valuable. But, I'm excited to see that what we come up with that we're gonna focus on. And take part in that.
Yeah, I agree. Anyone else like to share? I think it's time to get started. Well, it seems that, get out there. Are there any comments online, Stephanie? No. Well, as we prepare for this upcoming meeting, we're in that process, getting ready, we're getting ready to move. But before we do, I'd like to share with you some upcoming events. So we do have some things upcoming for our Head Start. Stephanie, can you go to our next slide? There we go. So upcoming, we have our trauma informed master class, train the trainer. This time it will be in person. So Shannon is gonna be here in person, you all, and we're gonna be meeting, and at the end of the trauma informed, the trainer is an extra day or 2 days. So 2 days, 2 days, and that will be in person. That will be starting in October, I believe, and then also we have our DEI workshop with Danielle Johnson. She is returning, and so we're gonna have our diversity, equity, inclusion training again, and our series, and that will be starting shortly. And I'm not sure, do we have any more? Yeah, yes. Antelope Valley Center Services, so you can copy of this. This is our community announcement that is becoming available for everyone in Antelope Valley. The Antelope Valley doors. And actually, if you know of anyone that's interested or your agency is interested, CPAD has the contract for that. But you would contact them for the doors.
I can read, if you want, I can read a little bit of what it is. Yeah. So Antelope Valley Community Reentry Center at Doors provides an array of comprehensive supportive services to address the barriers to reentry for justice involved individuals, particularly those on adult felony supervision, their families, and the community. Such services include but are not limited to housing, employment, legal aid, educational support, mental health assessment, and linkage to substance abuse counseling, as well as health and healing through the arts. The services are provided in a welcoming environment by county partners and community-based organizations that are considered leaders in reentry and experienced professionals with high-risk communities. So we'll be sending this flyer, everything that we have today, the presentation, everything, we'll email that out, including these guys. Yeah, make sure you sign in so that you can get it, because we gotta make sure we have your email.
Yeah, so for the last slide, the previous slide for the workshop, we'll email all of that with those flyers with the dates and everything.
And then I'll have the link to.
And the link to sign in, okay? Okay, next slide. All right, now you know you can follow us. We are on Facebook, Instagram, our YouTube channel, and we are on LinkedIn. So you can join us, you can see the presentation again, if you like, on our YouTube channel. Stephanie uploads that, every week, so, next slide. That's it. Thank you for coming, and we do have today, so thank you all for coming. Make sure you take your information with you. You can take that to Jared.